4 days before my little brother's graduation, I got a text from a guy I hadn't spoken to in 6 years. It said, "Heard you're moving back for a while. My place has a spare room if you need it. No pressure, M." I stared at that text for probably 10 minutes. Micah Reyes, the kid I used to climb the water tower with when we were 15 and too dumb to know it wasn't legal. The kid who taught me how to drive stick in a church parking lot. The kid I used to be a little bit in love with back when I didn't have the words for what that feeling even was. We hadn't fallen out exactly. Life just did what it does. He stayed in our hometown. I left for college 2 states over and never really came back except for holidays, and even those got shorter every year. Somewhere in there he got engaged to a girl named Priya. I heard about it through his mom, who ran into my mom at the grocery store. I sent a "congrats man" text with way too many exclamation points, and that was basically the last real conversation we had. Then, about 8 months before my brother's graduation, I heard the engagement was off. Nobody said why. Small towns are funny like that. Everyone knows everything except the one thing that actually matters. So when I got that text, I didn't really think about the why now. I just thought about the fact that my new job wasn't starting for 6 weeks, my lease was up, and staying in a hotel wasn't in the budget. I said yes before I let myself think too hard about it. I want to be honest about something right away because I think it matters for the rest of this. I didn't go into that summer expecting anything. I wasn't hopping for some big reunion moment. I was 26, tired between things, and I needed a bed and a roof for 6 weeks. That's it, that's the whole plan I had. The plan did not survive contact with reality. Micah picked me up from the bus station instead of letting me take a cab, which was so exactly like him that it almost made me laugh out loud right there on the curb. He looked older. Obviously, we were both older, but it was this specific kind of older. Tired around the eyes in a way that made me want to ask questions I didn't have the right to ask anymore. "You cut your hair," he said, like that was the thing that needed addressing first. "You didn't," I said back, and he laughed, and for about 4 seconds it felt like no time had passed at all, and then it very much felt like 6 years had passed, because neither of us knew what to say next. The drive to his apartment was quiet in that particular way where the silence isn't uncomfortable exactly, it's just loaded. Both of us glancing at the radio like it might save us. He finally just said, "So, Priya, you don't have to." "No, it's fine, people are gonna ask, might as well get it out of the way with you first." He drummed his fingers on the wheel. "It just wasn't right, that's the honest answer. Everybody wants a bigger story than that, and there isn't one." I didn't push. I've learned that much at least since I was 20. You don't push on the things someone's clearly protecting. Here's where it gets complicated, and I promise I'm not stretching this out for drama. His apartment had 2 bedrooms, that was the whole point of the offer. Except 3 days before I got there, the pipe behind the wall in the second bedroom had started leaking. And by the time I arrived, half the room was gutted down to the studs with a fan running in it around the clock, and a very apologetic building manager promising it'd be fixed soon, which in landlord language means anywhere from 2 weeks to never. Micah told me this standing in his kitchen, rubbing the back of his neck, not quite looking at me. "I can take the couch," I said immediately. "My couch is like 6 feet long and I've fallen off it twice sober. You will not survive it." "Micah, it's a queen bed, it's fine, we're adults." He said it fast, like he needed to get the sentence out before he lost his nerve, which in hindsight should have told me something. I said okay, because what else was I going to say? And that first night, we lay there in the dark like two people doing math problems, both of us pressed as close to our own edges of the mattress as physically possible, both of us very awake, both of us pretending very hard to be asleep. I want to skip ahead a little because if I walk you through every single night of 6 weeks, this is going to take forever, and honestly a lot of those nights were just normal. We fell into a rhythm faster than I expected. He worked mornings at his dad's hardware store. I spent my days job searching and half-heartedly unpacking a life I didn't have anywhere to put yet. In the evenings, we cooked bad pasta and watched terrible reality TV, and it felt weirdly like nothing had ever changed between us, except everything had. There were moments, I'm not going to pretend there weren't. The way he'd fall asleep facing me some nights, and I'd lie there memorizing the specific rhythm of his breathing like it was information I needed for later. The morning I woke up and his arm was slung over my waist, heavy and warm, and I just laid there frozen for 20 minutes trying to figure out if I should move or if moving would make it weirder than staying still. He woke up first, realized, and yanked his arm back so fast he nearly fell off the bed. Sorry, I sleep weird, he said, not making eye contact, and I said it was fine, and we both got up and made coffee and didn't discuss it, which became sort of our unofficial policy for anything that happened after midnight. Around week 3, I met his best friend Danny at a bar downtown. Danny had 3 beers in him and apparently zero filter, and at some point he leaned across the table and said, "So are you the reason the wedding got called off, or is that a sore subject?" Micah nearly choked on his drink. Danny. What? I'm just saying you two used to be attached at the hip in high school and then you got engaged to a woman 2 months after he moved away and now he's back and you're both acting like. Danny, I swear to God. Danny put his hands up, laughing, clearly enjoying this way too much, and changed the subject to something about fantasy football. But it sat there in the air between me and Micah for the rest of the night. Neither of us brought it up again. I told myself it was just Danny being Danny. I didn't fully believe myself, if I'm honest. Because here's the thing, I hadn't told anyone, not even the guys I dated in the 6 years since I left home. Micah wasn't just my best friend growing up. There was a stretch junior year of high school where I was so far gone on him it scared me. I never said anything. I was 17 in a town where I didn't know a single openly gay person, and the idea of saying it out loud felt like handing someone a loaded weapon and asking them not to use it on me, so I buried it. I dated a girl for 8 months my senior year specifically to bury it deeper. And when I got my acceptance letter to a school 2 states away, some small, quiet, shameful part of me was relieved because it meant I could leave before I ever had to find out what would happen if he knew. I never told him that. I was telling myself, even as an adult sharing his bed 6 years later, that I still wasn't going to tell him that. Week 4 is when things started cracking. It was a Tuesday. I remember because his shop was closed Tuesdays, so we were both home all day and it had rained since early morning, that heavy gray kind of rain that makes everything feel slower than it is. We were on the couch, the too small couch, half watching a movie neither of us could later remember the plot of, and somewhere around the second hour his phone buzzed on the coffee table. He glanced at it and his whole face changed, just went still. "You good?" I asked. "It's Priya," he said. "She's engaged someone else, already." He set the phone face down like it had burned him. "Oh, how do you feel about that?" He was quiet for a long time, long enough that I thought maybe he wasn't going to answer. "Relieved," he finally said, and then immediately looked like he regretted saying it. "That sounds terrible." "It doesn't sound terrible, it sounds honest." "I loved her, I want you to know that first, I did love her." He said it like he was arguing with someone who wasn't me. I don't think I loved her the way she needed to be loved. I don't think I loved her the way I'm supposed to love somebody I'm gonna marry." "Is that why you called it off?" He looked at me then, really looked at me, in a way that made my stomach drop for reasons I wasn't ready to name. "I called it off because 2 weeks before the wedding I had this thought that wouldn't leave me alone," he said. "I kept thinking about the fact that I'd never once, not one single time in 2 years with her, felt the way I used to feel just sitting on your porch doing nothing when we were 17. And I thought if I'm about to marry someone and I'm having thoughts like that, then something's really wrong, with me, not her." The room got very quiet. I could hear the rain against the window and my own heartbeat doing something ridiculous. "Micah." "I'm not saying it right," he said, standing up abruptly, running his hand through his hair, packing now. "I've been trying to figure out how to say this for like 3 weeks and I don't have it figured out, so I'm just gonna say it badly, okay? Just let me say it badly." I didn't move, I don't think I breathed. "I think I've been in love with you since we were kids," he said. "I think I've been in love with you the whole time and I didn't have a name for it back then and I was scared out of my mind, and I did the thing everybody around here does, I just buried it and dated girls and told myself I was fine. And I thought getting engaged would prove it to myself that I was fine, that I was normal, whatever that even means. And it didn't prove anything except that I was lying to a woman who deserved a lot better than being somebody's proof." I opened my mouth and nothing came out. "Then you texted me back that you needed a place to stay, and I offered before I even thought it through. And I've spent every single night for a month lying 2 feet away from you feeling like I was losing my mind," he said, voice cracking a little on that last part. "So that's it. That's the thing I never saw coming, that I'm apparently still not over you, and I don't even know if you remember what we were like back then, or if it's just me who's been carrying this around for 10 years like an idiot." The silence after that felt enormous. I want to describe it accurately because it wasn't romantic silence, it wasn't a movie pause, it was terrifying. It was the silence of somebody who just told you the truest thing they've ever said and is standing there completely unprotected, waiting to find out if you're going to hurt them or not. I remember, I said, and my voice came out rougher than I expected. I remember all of it. I've never told anyone this, but junior year I was so in love with you I used to make myself sick over it. I dated Casey Miller senior year specifically so nobody would ever guess. I left for college partly because I couldn't handle being that close to you and not saying anything. I've spent 6 years telling myself I made that up, that it wasn't real, that I was just a lonely teenager projecting onto the only person who was nice to me. He sat back down on the couch, slower this time, like his legs weren't fully cooperating. "You're serious," he said. "I'm serious." "So we've been this whole time, we've both just." "Yeah." He laughed, but it wasn't really a laugh, it was more like something breaking loose. "We are two of the dumbest people alive." "I'm not gonna argue with that." He looked at me, and there was this long stretch where neither of us moved, both of us just sitting there with everything finally out in the open and neither of us quite sure what you're supposed to do with that. Then he reached over slow, like he was giving me every chance to stop him, and put his hand against the side of my face. "Is this okay?" he asked, and his voice was barely above a whisper. "Yeah," I said, "it's okay." He kissed me like he'd been waiting 10 years to do it, which I guess he had. It wasn't clean or perfect. Our noses bumped and he laughed into it and I laughed too, and it was clumsy and real and nothing like the moment I used to imagine back when I was 17 lying awake convincing myself it would never happen. It was better, actually, because it wasn't imaginary. There was rain on the window and a couch that was too small and a man who just spent 10 minutes falling apart in front of me because he trusted me enough to do it. I won't pretend everything got simple after that. It didn't. We spent the rest of that evening just talking, really talking, years of stuff neither of us had said out loud to anyone. He told me about the 2 years with Priya, how much guilt he carried over it, how scared he still was of what people in town would say, how his dad was the kind of man who used the word normal a lot and meant something very specific by it. I told him about the guys I'd dated since college who never quite fit, who I now understood I'd been unconsciously measuring against a memory I didn't even let myself call a memory. We didn't solve any of it that night. You don't solve 10 years of buried feelings in one rainy Tuesday. The next 2 weeks were strange in a good way. We were careful with each other, almost shy, like we were starting something from scratch even though we'd known each other most of our lives. We still shared the bed. But it was different now, less like two people avoiding an edge and more like two people who'd finally stopped pretending the middle didn't exist. He still hadn't told his dad. I hadn't told my parents I was even staying with him, let alone anything else. We were figuring it out in real time, badly, the way real people actually do. The night before I moved into my new place, because my job did start eventually and I did need my own apartment, life doesn't just pause for you. We lay in that same bed one more time and he was quiet for a long stretch before he spoke. "I don't want this to be a summer thing," he said into the dark. "I know that's probably a lot to say, I know we just figured this out a month ago, I just needed you to know that." "It's not a lot to say," I told him, "it's the same thing I wanted to say and didn't know how." "So what happens now? You've got a whole new life starting an hour from here." "An hour's not that far," I said, "not compared to 6 years and 2 states." He laughed, quiet, and pulled me a little closer, and for the first time since I'd arrived, neither of us pretended to be asleep when we weren't. We just stayed there awake, talking about nothing and everything like we had all the time now that we'd spent 10 years convinced we didn't. It's been 8 months since that Tuesday. I'm not going to tell you it's been easy because that would be a lie, and this whole story only means something if I tell it straight. His dad still doesn't fully know, though I think he suspects, in the way parents do when they choose not to ask questions they're scared of the answers to. We do the hour drive most weekends, one direction or the other. Some weeks it's harder than others. Some weeks I still catch myself waiting for the version of this where it all falls apart, because that's what 10 years of hiding does to you. It teaches you not to trust the good thing when it finally shows up. But then I think about that rainy Tuesday, about him standing in the middle of his own living room saying it badly on purpose, because saying it perfectly wasn't the point. The truth was the point. And I think about how close we both came to never saying any of it. How easily that summer could have just been 6 weeks of a too small couch and careful silence, and both of us going back to our separate, half-lived lives, still carrying the same unspoken thing for another 10 years, or 20, or forever. Sometimes I lie awake next to him now and I think about 17-year-old me, sick with a feeling he didn't have a name for, so sure it would never be said out loud by either of us. I wish I could tell him it works out. I wish I could tell him the water tower kid grows up and says it first, actually says it badly in a living room in the rain, and that it's enough. It's more than enough, it's everything. I don't know exactly what happens next for us. Nobody ever really does, but I know I'm not leaving this time, and I know for the first time in 10 years neither is he.